Actually, we're 2 minutes over already. It's off.
So we're good to go, Senator.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Senator Kevin Erenberg from District 12, Senate District 12, and today we'll be holding a meeting on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And before we get started, I'll read through the checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I find that due to the emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency orders. In accordance with the emergency orders, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for electronic meetings, and all members of the committees and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access contemporaneously to watch and listen to the meeting via Zoom or YouTube or phone by following the directions and links provided by the General Court website. We have provided public notice of necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body. Let me read that again. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there's a problem with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and will be rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. And I'll start the roll call with Senator Gray. Senator Gray.
Hi, I am James Gray. I'm at my home in Rochester in District 6, and I'm alone in this room.
Senator Waters.
Senator David Waters, District 4. I'm at my home in Dover, alone in this room.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Hi, Senator Perkins Quokka, and I'm at my home in Portsmouth and alone in this room.
And I'm Senator Kevin Erenberg. I'm alone in this house in Nashua, my office, and I got a couple of puppies, so there might be an interruption from now and then. So with all that, we'll get started with HB 199, and we'll hear from the prime sponsor.
Okay, prime sponsor is Representative Bixby.
Welcome, Representative.
Thank you. Am I audible?
You are audible. No, you're not. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Kidding.
What? All right. So for the record, I'm Representative Peter Bixby, representing Stratford District 17, which covers part of Dover and Somersworth. And I am currently at my home in Dover alone. I'm going to give a bit of an introduction to the bill here. So HB 199 is basically a resubmission of a bill that made it as far as the table in the Senate last year before COVID did it in. There are some minor amendments to it this time around, which I think clarify the language a bit. And the main point of the bill is to insert the idea of soil health into the statute that governs our soil conservation districts. So I'm going to just give a little bit of a history of where those come from, so to provide some context. So back in the Dust Bowl, the federal government recognized that something needed to be done to protect agricultural soils, and they required the federal government, or the federal government required the states to develop state soil conservation plans. And they also created something called the Soil Conservation Service, which we now know as the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And the soil conservation districts provide education and technical assistance to farmers and landowners, and have been doing that since the late 1930s. And using the whatever the current best soil science is at the time. The last major revision to the New Hampshire Soil Conservation Plan was in 1985, with some minor changes in 1995. And what that did was bring into the picture the interaction between soil conservation and water conservation. And in the 1980s, the current soil science had a main focus of physical soil structure and soil nutrient chemistry. Since that time, there's been more development in terms of soil science, and one thing that has gotten a lot of recognition is the biological activity in soil and the importance of soil organic matter. It's been discovered that more biological activity and more organic matter lead to better water retention, better aeration, better nutrient retention, better access to soil nutrients for plants. So one of the things that happens when you get those things into the mixture is the soils are that have a lot of biological activity are more resilient to various climatological and other events. And so that resilience that these soils have is now given the name of soil health. So what this bill does is it basically brings the science in the state soil conservation plan up to date by including references to soil health and to how that impacts things like drought resilience, improved access to nutrients, nutrient retention in soils, which has a side effect of them not going into Great Bay, or at least in my region, or not going into waterways. Another thing that this bill does is it recognizes the good work that our soil conservation districts are already doing with soil health. A lot of the things that have been developed in the last decade or so in the soil conservation districts, such as giving increased focus on cover cropping, providing low-cost rental of machinery to do soil seed drilling, soil aeration, reducing soil compaction, and better handling of cover crops are all things that help soil health. This gets to another really important aspect of this bill, which is that this bill will provide stronger support when the soil conservation districts are doing grant applications. This requires a little bit of mention of how the soil conservation districts are funded. Each county has its own soil conservation district, and county funds generally cover the cost of administrative staff and a small part of their program budget. But a large part of their program budget comes from grants. And a number of those grants come from the NRCS. Some come from private funds or other governmental funds. And one of the things that the soil conservation districts are always doing is looking out for new ways that they can use grant funding to further their mission. And one thing that a number of private foundations are now looking at is supporting the idea of soil health as a way of developing greater climate resilience and uh, and when they're looking to do grant funding, one of the things that they look at is they look at the mission statement of the organization that's applying for the grant. For our soil conservation districts, the mission statement is essentially our state soil health statutes. So by including the idea of soil health in these statutes, we're basically giving our soil conservation districts a tool they need in order to better apply for grants. And so one thing that this bill doesn't do is it doesn't tell farmers what to do. And another thing it doesn't do is impose new requirements on soil conservation districts. It is essentially a way to help them do better what they're already doing. With that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Bixby. So I don't know if you saw the news item today from UNH and the Boston Globe that they just received a couple $1 million to study this very issue of the impacts of climate change on soil health. Have you seen that?
I did not see that item.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with a question on that. Is that it seems that the important thing there is recognizing that for New Hampshire, the increased precipitation rates and the warmer winters and less snows cover and all those kinds of things can have an impact on the nitrogen and the fertility. So I wondered if you could just take a moment to explain why that fertility cycle and nitrogen cycle are important with soil health.
Oh, sure. Nitrogen is probably the most important limiting nutrient for plant growth. So if plants don't have nitrogen, they can't grow effectively. There are other nutrients that are also critical, like phosphorus and potassium. But one of the issues with nitrogen is that in the form that it takes when it's available to plants, it's fairly soluble. And one of the things that soil health does is it creates a reservoir of biological activity, so funguses and bacteria and soil arthropods, and all of these critters in the soil help keep the nitrogen that enters the soil in place in the soil rather than leaching out. So a soil that doesn't have a lot of biological activity is likely to leach out a lot of nitrogen. That nitrogen ends up in our waterways, whereas soils that have a lot of biological activity tend to retain the nitrogen in the soil, and there are interactions between funguses and bacteria and plant roots where the plant roots supply nutrients to the fungus and bacteria in the form of sugars, and in return, those the funguses and bacteria provide mineral nutrients like nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus, and a whole range of small micronutrients as well, to the plants. So it's okay. So does that cover your question?
Yes. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony and for bringing the bill forward.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Representative Pearl,
Representative, welcome.
who seems to have left. So we're going to jump to, oh, no, there he is.
Hey, there you are.
Sorry about that. There seemed to be a lag.
You look the same like you last time I saw you.
I should turn my camera on. Huh?
No, that's fine.
I agree. I should.
We're good. We're good.
Well, thank you, members of and the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. I'm going to be very brief. Representative Bixby did a very thorough job. Just wanted to give the support that the E&A committee passed this bill 18-1 and went on the consent calendar. 3 or 4 quick points. This bill enjoys the broad support of ag groups across the industry. Couple of the key points that I think I took out of Representative Bixby's testimony that I also agree with is the importance of these groups in supporting the ag programs of the conservation districts. I mean, and they really do play a significant importance in the grant process for many of the funds that are available for agricultural businesses across the state. I'll highlight one more point. This bill underwent a significant review within our committee because as it originally came out, it was structured in a way that some of the members couldn't support, but I will hail Representative Bixby and a couple other members of our committee, Representative Hamola specifically, that they worked really hard on this and came out with language that enjoyed true bipartisan support from our committee. So I would encourage you to support the bill and pass it as we've presented it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee? Just one from me. NRCS stands for what?
See, National Resources and Conservation something. I'm trying to remember what the S is. Service, I believe.
Well, strikes.
I should know that. I work with them on a regular basis. I just always refer to them as NRCS. We get used to these acronyms like we do in the State House.
And this was amended in the House. Everything good with this bill? There's no other pending amendments or anything like that?
No, we were good with it as it came through.
Okay.
I had somebody ask me one day what RSA stood for. Do you know how long I had to stop and think about that?
Well, I the public sees these, and a lot of times these get put out there, and I just want them to, to know what they are. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate the question. And National Resource and Conservation Service. There we go. That's what it is. It came to me eventually.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing how there's no further questions, we'll move on to our next person. Thanks, Representative.
So next up, we have Representative Kaplan.
Representative Kaplan, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Senators, for taking my testimony.
Absolutely.
This is Representative Kaplan from Merrimack 6, the town of Henniker and Bradford. And this is a fitting beginning to Earth Week as you hear testimony on this bill that would update the state's soil conservation plan to include provisions for agricultural practices that increase soil capacity, not only for fertility, but as an additional means to reducing our state's carbon footprint by seeking to increase carbon uptake from the atmosphere into the natural carbon sink of the soil. This bill would be a win for the environment, but also for farmers and consumers, as the practices that increase carbon uptake in the soil also lower input costs for farmers and complement the type of small-scale mixed farms that fit well into the New Hampshire landscape and provide the backbone of a healthy, sustainable, and resilient local food system. So with this bill, we acknowledge that soil conservation and agricultural practices that enhance soil conservation are essential, not only for a healthy planet, but also for a healthy food system. And I urge you, Senators, to take this bill that came out of my committee, the Environment and Agriculture Committee, with a near unanimous vote and speed it on its way. And with that, I'll end my testimony.
Thank you. Senator Waters with the question? Oh, I thought, okay. I'm getting used to, the body language here, just seeing no further questions. Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony.
And the final speaker that I have signed up is David Budrow.
Welcome, Mr. Budrow.
Thank you very much. And thank you, members of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. My name is David Budrow. I'm speaking today on behalf of RISE, which stands for Responsible Industry for a Sound Environment. RISE is a national trade association representing manufacturers, formulators, distributors, and others involved in the specialty pesticide and fertilizer industry. A number of our members manufacture and distribute an emerging category of product called plant biostimulants. Plant biostimulants are products that cover a wide array of technologies, many of which have beneficial effects on soil, in addition to their ultimate positive effect on plant growth. For example, there are various microorganisms that help retain nutrients such as nitrogen and carbon in the soil by digesting them and holding them in their cells into the nutrients are eventually released back into the soil in a plant available form. This action prevents those nutrients from being lost from the root zone through leaching. So they have very good sustainability argument around these kind of products. We are very encouraged that the committee is looking at this kind of legislation. We support HB 199, and we encourage the inclusion of a definition for plant biostimulants. We believe this emerging product category can help play a significant role in improving soil health. Thank you very much.
Mr. Budrow, is plant biostimulants in the bill? Don't think did I see that wrong?
It is not in the version that I have seen, the most recent version. We were in contact with some of the folks in New Hampshire about that. There is a definition that the USDA has been discussing over the last several years. They issued a report to Congress at the end of 2019, where they formally define what a plant biostimulant is. They actually provide two different definitions for that. And so if it's helpful, we can follow up after with that exact language so that ideally, as other states look at a definition for this term, it is as consistent as possible.
Where would you want to see this language put in the bill?
Yes, let me pull it up right here.
Under maybe section 5 where it says soil health, or?
Yes, that would be a logical place, I think, for it. It's
6.
6? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I see. Yep.
6, yes. It's in that section to talk about drought resilience, erosion control, watershed protection. A lot of these are attributes that a lot of the plant biostimulant industry would argue that their products can help farmers and other end users, such as golf course superintendents, homeowners even achieve by using those kind of products. If less fertilizer is running off into watershed and more is being taken up by the plant, it's a win-win for the user of that particular product, because they're losing less and their return on their investment is better, especially on the farming side. And then on the environmental side, if less is running off, then it can improve water quality.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I when I said section 6, I meant Roman 6, not section 6, because section 6 is the effective date. So duh.
Roman 5, yeah. Well, I was thinking Roman 5, not section 5, right? Roman 5, Roman 6.
And I just wanted to suggest, Mr. Budrow, that you talk with the sponsor of the bill about that, and that it seems to me, and that's why, just for example, looking at section 3, Roman 6, that there's nothing in this definition that excludes the product that you're talking about. It seems, wouldn't you agree that this is quite a generic definition, so that even if we don't include some language, that surely what you've described is something that could improve the health of soils in all the ways that are described below. So would you see it that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in general, at a high level, it does talk about, and then also other aspects of the bill talks about healthy soil practices, and the way that's defined, I mean, that or described, that could include things such as plant biostimulants. And we're glad to circle back with the bill sponsor as well. I think the hope in the long term, I won't go to too much detail here, but there's been a lack of a definition for this term, both at the federal and state levels for a number of years. And so to the extent that it can be formally defined and then hopefully harmonized to a certain extent across different jurisdictions, it'll be beneficial to the regulators and to the folks that use these products.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Further questions from the committee? Under healthy soil practices, mean agricultural practices that improve the health of soils, could we just add, for example, plant biostimulants or something to that effect to help the bill along? Or do we need a whole new amendment for this? Or you wouldn't need it, just move forward with it, you think? Senator Waters?
Oh, I thought we could discuss an executive session.
Yeah, I know. I just trying to save time, that's all. All right, well, thank you very much. I do have one final question, though. These biostimulants couldn't be considered GMOs in any way, correct?
That's right. Yep, that is correct.
I know that question will come up with somebody, so I just want to make sure that not to be confused with the GMOs. All right, seeing how no further questions, thank you, Mr. Budrow.
Thank you.
So, Senator, we have Representative Bixby's hand up again, and if anybody else is interested in testifying on this bill, now would be the time to raise your hand, and I can let Representative Bixby back in.
By all means. Representative.
Okay, thank you for hearing my additional comment. So we had actually in Roman numeral 6 of section 3, we had actually previously in a previous version of the bill, we had a lot of text that dealt with particular methods of improving soil health, including things like cover cropping and organic agriculture and a whole range of things. And we decided that if we tried to add too many specific methods, then that would give the impression that if there wasn't a method listed, then it wasn't in some way approved. So we decided that it would be much better to really make the high level goals very clear, and any method that such as biostimulants or organic agriculture or cover cropping that achieves the goals that we lay out in section 6 is something that we would really feel very good about. But we decided that it didn't make sense to have it in the legislation itself. And I could imagine that there might be a place somewhere else in our statutes that it would make sense to say something about biostimulants, but that would be a different bill. And if the representative from RISE wishes to get in touch with me about that at some point, then maybe we could put something in for next year. But I don't think it belongs in this bill.
Okay. Questions, statements? Would anybody else like to comment on this?
So I don't see any other hands raised, Senator.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so going once, going twice, going thrice. And so we will close the hearing on 199 and move on to 249. Are we on time?
We are on time, and the prime sponsor is Representative Pearl.
Welcome back.
Good afternoon and welcome back again. For the record, my name is Representative Howard Pearl, and I am the prime sponsor on House Bill 249, which is relative to animal shelter facilities. Quickly, there's 2 points to this bill. This again was another bill that was around last term and didn't make it forward due to some COVID concerns, as many bills fell ill to that. So we are making 2 points that we're changing. So under the first section, under definitions, we are adding the words "or leased," because we found in testimony that there were some shelters who did not own their facilities, and in order to make them so that they were complying with the law, we this would allow them to own or lease it. The second part of the bill makes a few changes to terminology. Some are for clarification. And the one is that one that was requested by the shelter group themselves. So they're the group that they're representative from the group. So quickly, this defines that, any dogs, cats, or ferrets that are transferred out of a shelter facility shall have a positive form of identification, including tattoos, collars, microchips, ear tags, or any other permanent form of ID. We also clarified in 436-100 that animals 3 months of age or older shall be vaccinated, because we didn't want any confusion of someone trying to vaccinate an animal that was too young. Part D, well, the new Part D, will provide some relief and protection for owners and co-owners of these animals, and it kind of defines a time that they need to be notified in. And the last section, well, that's kind of in D and E. Part E brings in the secondary owner. And the last section, Section F, no animal shall be transferred, no animal shelter shall transfer any dog, cat, or ferret that is received from outside of the state without an official health certificate and until quarantine requirements are in 437-8 are met. This is important, and this was a part that the shelter group asked us to add. It's already a practice, but they wanted to make sure it was codified so that it was clear and understood by all of the shelters, and that there no opportunity for misinterpretation. So in a nutshell, that's what the bill does, and I'll take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Pearl. So I had a couple of questions. First is in Section 2, Roman 5A, the forms of identification. So it may be that I'm just a little bit confused, but it says including but not limited to tattoo, collar, microchip, ear tag, or any other permanent form of identification.
Mm-hmm.
Is a collar a permanent form of identification?
I guess not technically, but it's certainly a form of identification. And maybe there is a form of positive identification. So it says all dogs, cats, or ferrets transferred out of an animal shelter facility shall have a form of positive identification, not permanent. And then
Okay,
that's
thanks.
included,
I
but not limited to.
I kind of knew what you're talking about, but I was trying to figure out how it was permanent. Never.
Well, my apologies if I misspoke there. I may have been reading two different parts.
Okay, so and then a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Follow-up, yes.
So the commissioner gets to make some decisions here, fine. Did you have any discussion about whether there ought to be rulemaking around how the commissioner makes decisions?
That did not come up in our hearings, and the commissioner didn't represent that there was any need for him to do so. So I guess I'd leave it at that.
Thank you.
We could certainly add that if your committee felt there was a need.
I mean, if somebody gets denied, maybe they want to know what the criteria were and if there weren't rules. But if the commissioner and you I think it's not really needed, then fine. That's
sure.
That's
No, I appreciate the question, but it was not raised as a concern.
okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Stacey Ober.
Welcome, Stacey.
Good afternoon, Chairman Avard, members of the committee. My name is Stacey Ober. I am the legislative analyst in New England for the American Kennel Club, and I'm grateful to have a few minutes of your time. I did submit written testimony to you all this morning, and I'm here this afternoon to support House 249, House 250, and House 338. The American Kennel Club is a 135-year-old animal welfare organization, and we are recognized as a trusted expert in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. We are a club of clubs representing more than 5,000 clubs across the country. And in 2019, we licensed and sanctioned 141 dog events in New Hampshire alone, where more than 24,000 dogs participated. So I shared that with you just in terms of background of who we are. And I think Chairman Pearl gave an excellent overview of House 249, and we do support it wholeheartedly in terms of making those changes. Would you like me to speak to the other two bills while I'm here, or shall I?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll wait. Yeah, we'll be focused on this one at this time. But thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. All right, thank you very much.
The last speaker I have signed up, Senator, is Angela Ferrari.
Welcome, Angela.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I will also be speaking on the three bills that remain. I'll do a brief introduction of myself and Dog Owners of the Granite State, the organization that I represent. We were founded in 1991 to represent the interests of all pet owners in New Hampshire. We're a nonprofit organization that monitors legislation to ensure that it is in the best interest of both pets and their owners. Our membership includes veterinarians, hunters, mushers, dog and cat breeders, livestock guard dog owners, herding dog owners, kennel clubs for canines and cats, amongst general pet owners and other type of members in the realm of pets. So with that behind me, I just want to provide my support for HB 249, as mentioned by Ms. Ober. Chairman Pearl did a great job of really outlining the key pieces that are a part of this bill, so I don't feel I need to go through them all again, but Dog Owners of the Granite State provides full support.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you
very much. Anybody else?
So, Senator, that was the last person I had signed up to speak. So if anybody else would like to speak on House Bill 249, if you could raise your hand now. And if you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. And I'm not seeing anyone, Senator.
All right, we'll close the hearing on that. And how are we doing on time?
We're ready to go into House Bill 250.
Well, let's do it.
All right. The prime sponsor again is Representative Pearl.
Geez, Mr. Pearl, you're really active these days. Just giving
Good
us a lot
afternoon.
of work. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Just significantly better than I was 3 minutes ago when I last testified. Well, good afternoon, committee members, and thank you again for your time. I am the prime sponsor on House Bill 250. And this is an act that's relative to pet vendors. So a little bit of background on this bill. Back in the budget of 2019, as some of you may recall, we did some changes in this area of statute in 437 that changed the thresholds for who had to register as a pet vendor. And in doing so, as anytime we change statutes, sometimes there were good things that happen, and sometimes we find as we go along that there's some things that need a little bit of changing. And so this bill does some tweaks to this area of statute and a couple of others as well that are related. So there's three main functions of the bill. The first function is changing the threshold in the pet vendor definition. As I previously stated, it went from 50 to 25, which was a pretty significant and drastic cut. And when that happened, it brought in a whole bunch of members of the breeder community that now had to comply with pet vendor regulations where they hadn't before. And many of these we found were people that were doing this, as a very small, not necessarily a hobby, but a very small business, and sometimes a hobby as well. And they were doing it from their homes. So in reviewing this and listening to the concerns that were raised from the area folks that were bothered, we looked at changing these numbers up to from 25 up to 30 dogs or 35 or more cats. And the other thing that we changed was the registration period versus the time when they would actually apply for their licensure, so that they were staggered by a few months, and this was done at the request of the Department of Ag. The second function of this bill, excuse me, I'm tongue-tied here, creates an exemption process, because one of the other things that we found happened was when a person was approaching that threshold, they may be on their second litter and they're only up to 17, 18 dogs, and they feel they're okay to have a third litter, but all of a sudden they have that anomaly where, geez, they have a litter that has 10, 11, 12, 13 puppies, and it puts them over the threshold, and now they've got a litter of puppies that they want to transfer, and they're up against an 8 or a 10-week threshold of when they want to move them. They can't become a pet vendor that quickly. So what this would do, and again, we work pretty closely with the Department of Ag on this, taking a lot of recommendations from them as to what would work and what would provide some reasonable relief. And so this exemption that they can apply for would allow them that when they hit those thresholds of 30 or 35, that they could, 30 dogs or 35 cats, that they could apply for an exemption once every 4 years. And so that they could have an additional 15 transfers. Okay, so I think that pretty well covers everything that's in that section. And the commissioner, again, we had looked at some different time frames. We had thought of maybe 2 or 3 year intervals, but we decided on 4-year intervals would work the best. The third section of this bill provides for some clarification in language for zoning requirements, because back in 2019, the legislature tried to make its will clear that we didn't want these new folks that were brought down into having to comply as a pet vendor to have to apply with their community and get permission from their zoning, because again, they're very small. Many of them are doing this right in their house. Well, it came to our attention that some of the communities were still requiring these zoning and site plan reviews for these smaller breeders. So we crafted this language again I've worked hand in hand with Senator Bradley on this as well. And we've come up with this language where it seems to be acceptable to everyone, that this will clearly convey the will of the legislature that any breeder that is under the old threshold of 50 or more dogs or cats does not have to comply with any additional zoning requirements than they did previously. And so this very much makes it clear. Well, I'll wrap it up with just mentioning that Senator Bradley and I have been working very hard on this, as well as the animal database bill, as you recall, and they sort of correlate in some of the areas that we're working in. And so he and I are looking at getting all of this ironed out. I think we're eventually going to end up probably going back to 30 cats instead of 35, where we had moved to 2, but that's something we're working on doing. And, this bill has been a long time coming. As many of you remember, we've worked in this area of law for a lot of years, all of the years I've been in the legislature. And so this is an effort to kind of bring all of the various animal interest groups together to sit down and let's find some place we can all be happy with and be done with this. And I think this gets us there. But I will say that Senator Bradley and I are still working on some other areas that we're trying to get everything together. So with that, I will end this and take any questions.
Senator Waters.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Pearl. So I just want to clarify your last point there, because I remember 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, what a struggle it was.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify: are you saying is Senator Bradley good to go on this, or should we consult with him about that number of cats?
So the number of cats, I think he would like to see back to 30. In fact, I don't want to represent, his position, but that's my understanding from the conversations we've had.
If he wants that, you're good with that?
I would not hold the bill up for that. That's not a hill is worth dying on to me. We moved it to 35. I originally had it at 30, and we went to 35 because there was some members of the, excuse me, of the feline industry that came forward with some, reasons why they wanted it there. So we moved it to there. To me, it's a non-point for me. 30 or 35 is fine.
Thank you. And one more follow-up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And same question as last time, because the commissioner is getting to do some exemptions here, Any discussion about whether there should be rules around that?
He was happy with the way that we had structured this. He felt that it was, at least, again, I won't speak for him, but it's my understanding that he was supportive of the way that we had crafted this. Didn't express any interest for any additional ability to make rules on it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you all. And I promise you, that's my last bill today that I'm testifying on.
Oh, just keep them coming. We love it.
I'm sure you do.
All right, no further questions from the committee? We have anybody else that wanted to testify on this?
So next up, Senator, we have Stacey Ober.
Welcome back, Stacey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Chairman Pearl went through the bill in great detail, and I just want to acknowledge our gratitude to both Chairman Pearl, Senator Bradley, and the commissioner in the amount of work they've done to get this right. I know the community of dog breeders had substantial concerns with the detrimental impact to them. And we're eager to see this go to the governor's desk and be signed this year. So thank you for making it a priority today. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from the committee? Are you okay with the number of cats?
I don't represent cats. I will say that on average,
good question.
a litter of puppies can on average be 1 to 12. And so
Yes.
if you were someone who personally owned your own dogs and were breeding them for purposes of improving the breed, exhibiting and showing them, and only transferring them, selling puppies incidental to that, there was a high likelihood that individuals could go over the 25 number. So we're grateful for the changes in this bill.
All right.
Yeah, don't ask dog folks about getting more cats, right, Senator?
That's a true question. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. Seeing no further questions. Anybody else want to testify on this bill?
Next, we have Angela Ferrari.
Welcome back, Angela.
I'm back. Since I already did my introduction, I don't have to go there. I just want to elaborate on some of the points, speaking on behalf of the dog and cat breeders here in New Hampshire. With the 50% reduction in the numbers that happened in 2019, as you've heard from Stacey and Representative Pearl, that was a really big impact to our community, especially those who are in the hobby industry, such as myself. I show my dogs, I purely breed them so that I can try and produce that next best puppy that I can use in shows and performance events. And having a larger breed, which is the Doberman, you can have a litter that could easily have 8 to 12 puppies, and just 3 in 1 year could easily put you in the pet vendor category. And it doesn't mean that people will be breeding that much consistently. So they may have to jump through the hoops and the license fees and the inspections and everything for 1 year, where then they may not even meet those requirements years down the road until it comes along again. So I think that slight increase in the number of transfers that's allowed in this bill helps ease up some of that tight restrictions on them. But also the exemption that was mentioned for that person who maybe has that extra litter 1 year. They don't have to go through all those hoops, assuming that, the commissioner approves their exemption. So he still does have the right to approve or deny that. So if there is someone who is consistently trying to apply for the exemption or things like that, there is still the protection that he would be able to review, approve, or deny. And then the last piece that's really huge in this bill is the municipal zoning conformity requirements. A lot, if not all, of our community raises their puppies and kittens in their homes. And that's a really fantastic way to raise and socialize these puppies and kittens who are going to go out and live in families and in other homes, rather than just in that commercial kennel type of setting. We had a number of people, due to the changes in 2019, who were not able to get the municipal conformity approved by their town because of the type of zoning or the fact that they were going to be called a pet vendor. Really sounds like they're becoming a commercial entity, even when they just might be having a couple litters a year that nobody was really concerned with prior. But now that they're hearing this big commercial label, it was giving some concerns. And so by making the adjustment there, keeping it at the 50 plus transfers a year, which really starts to indicate more of a commercial entity, that makes sense. You know, keep the zoning where it was. But for those who are transferring under that amount, which really could just be a few litters a year and isn't getting into that commercial kennel type of environment, we were really appreciative of the Commissioner, Representative Pearl, and Senator Bradley for hearing those concerns and be willing to address them this way. And I believe that that covers everything I had there. We are happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information on why this bill is so important to our community.
Okay, any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Jen?
Next up, we have Kurt Erenberg.
Welcome. Kurt.
Good afternoon. I'm Kurt Erenberg with the I'll start again. Kurt Erenberg with the New Hampshire Director of the Humane Society of the United States. And thank you for allowing me to testify on this bill. We initially did oppose this bill, but due to the Chairman Pearl and Senator Bradley and all of the parties coming together in a spirit of compromise, which we hope we will be able to move forward with. We're going to not oppose this bill today. I just wanted to remind the committee and other folks that this legislation in 2019 was a direct result of the string of cruelty cases that we saw in that period of time. I think we all recall. And this updated law has been in effect for less than a year. So we still believe that the numbers that were in the first bill were correct. We're happy to see how this works moving forward. We hope we can all work together. And again, respectfully thank Chairman Pearl for his hard work on all of this, the other members of the House Committee, this committee, and Senator Bradley and other folks that worked on this. I'm happy to be part of a team to move forward. Thank you. Any questions or concerns about our position? Happy to take that now or later.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony, Kurt.
The last person I have signed up to speak, Senator, is Gina Scrofano.
Welcome, Gina.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Gina Scrofano. I'm a resident of New Hampshire, and I do wholeheartedly believe in the spirit of compromise, but I do unfortunately have to speak in opposition to HB 250 today. And former testimony very briefly touched on why we were brought here in the first place. And just to highlight the gravity of this, I do want to just go over that very briefly. Our former pet vendor definition and breeder licensing threshold led to only 5 to 8 licensed and regulated breeders out of the estimated thousands in New Hampshire. And that lack of oversight contributed to over 6 animal cruelty cases involving unlicensed New Hampshire breeders in a span of approximately 2.5 years. Those cases involved the suffering of over 300 animals, cost New Hampshire taxpayers over $3.5 million in cost of care expenses via general state funds or donations, and involve the spread of zoonotic diseases. So I come from the standpoint that increasing that licensing threshold by any amount poses an unnecessary risk of increasing the potential of those crucial issues that New Hampshire has experienced in the past and that likely continue to occur behind closed doors today, despite the steps that we've taken so far to address them. I want to highlight that our current threshold of 25 dogs transferred per year just barely puts us in line. And in some instances, it's still weaker than other states around us. And increasing that could lead to New Hampshire once again becoming a go-to state for irresponsible breeders. Multiple cruelty cases have involved breeders who moved to New Hampshire from out of state. The case in Alexandria and Bristol, the unlicensed breeder moved to New Hampshire from Mass after a series of violations, including an outbreak of parvovirus, which claimed the life of 10 dogs. After moving to New Hampshire, 29 German Shepherds died in that defendant's custody, in addition to another 22 German Shepherds that were found suffering without edible food and potable water in sub-zero temperatures. In the Great Dane Wolfboro case, the unlicensed New Hampshire breeder testified to the Superior Court that she moved from New Hampshire from Maine. That case involved dogs living in abhorrent living conditions and suffering from Giardia, another disease transferable to humans, among other ailments and injuries. For examples of other state laws around us, Vermont requires breeder licensure for those who transfer 3 litters of dogs or cats in 12 months. If you look at smaller litters, the current threshold, that could be up to 8 litters if you're talking only a litter of 1 to 3 puppies. Licensing required in Connecticut is for the transfer of 2 litters of dogs within 12 months. Maine requires any breeder who keeps 5 intact breeding females or more, or transfers 16 dogs or cats in 12 months. I also want to highlight that the exemption language does create a loophole that I think we need to look at. So firstly, obviously, I recommend that the existing threshold remains the 25 dogs and 25 cats per year, but I believe language should be added that clearly states that the exempt year shall not be included among the required 4 previous years that the person was not required to have a license. So that exempt year should not be considered a year that the breeder did not need a license. I believe that there should also be language that states no person or entity shall receive an exemption for 2 or more consecutive years. And based on the bill's sponsor, what he stated was that that was his intent, but I believe there should be clear language that indicates that to confirm there's no misunderstandings there. Additionally, because the exemption would be granted to those who have been required to be licensed or have not rather been required to be licensed and regulated for 4 years or more, that means that the DOA would be granting an exemption to pet vendors who haven't been inspected for years or potentially ever. So the Department of Agriculture would have no way of confirming the living conditions of the person's animals or whether they're complying with existing regulations before granting that exemption. Therefore, I believe that there should be language there that an inspection within at least the past 12 months should be a requirement for that exemption. And I want to note that, we're seeing some growing pains here from breeders that are experiencing this new threshold. But it's important to understand that breeding, rescuing, or sheltering and selling and transferring animals in New Hampshire, that is not a mandate nor a right. It is a choice and it's a privilege. And existing laws and rules require mere basic standards of care and inspections at reasonable times, which animal rescue shelters and fosters had been adhering to for years. So to be clear, before the law changed in 2019, all pet vendors, except for breeders, were required to be licensed and regulated by the state, regardless of the number of animals they transferred per year. And that includes fosters, approximately 80 of them that operate out of their private homes. So while I have no objection to Section 3 and putting the municipal zoning issue aside, the assertion that licensure poses a hardship due to inspections in private homes and operating regulations are too challenging to follow are just unjustifiable. The New Hampshire Agriculture Rules Part 1704, which are the operating standards for licensed pet vendors, requires basic fundamental care, such as access to potable food and water, a sanitary environment, and enclosures that provide enough space for an animal to turn around, sit down, and lie down comfortably. So these are basic standards of care that all of those who breed or transfer animals should provide regardless of a licensing requirement. And in these terms, whether one considers themselves a hobby breeder or a commercial breeder is irrelevant. So just as Chief Rondo from the Wolfboro Police Department pleaded with the House Environment and Agriculture Committee in 2018 and 2019, I'm really urging you today as we consider this, that when you hear individuals expressing dislike or the potential of being inconvenienced by New Hampshire's existing pet vendor definition, that we do not undo the work that has been done to implement the law that we have in place. And I implore you to consider the millions in cost of care expenses, the risk of spreading zoonotic diseases, the 105 golden retrievers from Bradford, the 1 cat and 15 dogs from Berlin, the 52 Labrador retrievers from Marlborough, the 60 German shepherds from Alexandria and Bristol, the 21 chihuahuas and 1 cat from Croydon, and the 84 Wolfboro Great Danes, and the numerous other animals who potentially and likely suffered from unchecked animal cruelty due to weak and a lack of common sense oversight. So I truly thank you for your time, and I am certainly willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Gina. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Jen?
Okay, Senator, that's the last person I had signed up to speak on House Bill 250. If anybody else would like to testify on the bill, you can raise your hand now. Representative Bixby has raised his hand.
Representative, you're welcome.
Thank you. I just want to add my support to passage of HB 250. We have been working on trying to improve our animal welfare laws over the last several terms, and I think that this is one more minor step in that improvement. I think that in terms of making significant changes to the way that we are doing animal welfare really needs to wait until we have a better set of data, and that better set of data is going to come once we have the database, the animal records database in place. So this bill is a minor tweak in order to prevent people who are essentially hobby breeders from inadvertently going over the limits in the law. I believe that there are some flaws still in the way that our laws are working, but we can't really address those until we have the data that we're going to be getting from the database. So I think that this is a very good interim step, and once we have a better overview of how things are really working in the state, then we can revisit this in 2 or 3 terms.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing anybody else with their hand raised, Senator, at this time.
All right, so we'll close the hearing on 250 and we'll move on to HB 338FN.
Okay, the prime sponsor is Representative Sullivan.
Welcome, Representative.
Greetings to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Sullivan from Grantham, representing Sullivan County District 1. HB 338 is a bill that I sponsored on behalf of a constituent of mine from Springfield, Diane Richardson. And I'll just note that she will be testifying and she's calling in by phone. So Jennifer, her number ends in 9042. So just so you will see her hand go up, I believe. This bill expands and modifies RSA 466:42-A. It increases the penalty for stealing a dog from a misdemeanor to a misdemeanor for a first offense, a Class B felony for a second offense, and a Class A felony for any subsequent offenses. It further increases the penalty for poisoning a dog from a misdemeanor to a Class B felony. It also modernizes the provision on collars by recognizing the new electronic GPS or other tracking collars. And it further prohibits the removal of microchips by any unauthorized individual. This bill, there was a similar bill filed last year, and like many others, it passed the House and then died a COVID death in the Senate. This bill in particular passed the Criminal Justice Committee on a 19-2 vote, and then passed in the House on a voice vote. So it received strong support there. And with that, I will close and take any questions and possibly refer some of them to my friend Diane Richardson.
Thank you, Representative. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Okay.
All right, next up, Senator, we have Stacey Ober.
Welcome back, Stacey.
Hi, thank you. As I noted, the American Kennel Club fully supports House 338. I'll just acknowledge the statute has not been updated since 1977 when I looked at it. And unfortunately, I can share with you that dog theft has been on the rise, in particular during the pandemic. There was even an article done by Time Magazine last month that with the high demand for pets and some folks that are desperate, we have seen increases in pets being stolen out of yards, home invasions for high quality coveted breeds of dogs that are then flipped and sold. So I just shared that with you. I do have one citation in my written testimony, and I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Stacey. Any questions for Stacey? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Next, Senator, we have Diane Richardson.
Welcome, Diane.
Ms. Richardson, you should be able to unmute yourself by pressing *6. There we go.
Okay, do you have me?
Yes.
All right, hi. Thank you for taking my testimony today. My name is Diane Richardson. I'm a lifetime New Hampshire resident, and I've been involved with purebred dogs since 1985. I've bred and competed with my own dogs, as well as training, grooming, and boarding dogs for the general public. We have personal dogs that we work in the woods and fields, including a shed antler dog, a human tracking dog, and 2 dogs that are licensed by New Hampshire Fish and Game to track wounded deer, bear, and moose. I have submitted a pretty detailed written testimony that I would really urge you to read, as it is has cases that as examples for you. The bill was created to address a really growing problem, and it's a nationwide problem. It's not restricted to New Hampshire, and it's not restricted to hunting dogs. It's a problem in all states, and as Stacey mentioned, it's pet theft, but it's also collar tampering. Current law does not specifically address tracking collars, tracking devices, or identification microchips, only, quote, collars. The absence of this, unfortunately, has caused law enforcement to be hesitant to press charges for tracking collar tampering and removal, and there's zero New Hampshire law addressing microchips at all. My dogs wear GPS collars while they work. Many hunting and working dogs wear them. And additionally, a growing number of pet dogs also wear some form of a GPS collar or tag too. And a very large portion of dogs are now microchipped, which both enables them to be identified and reunited with their owners if lost. Unfortunately, there's a growing population segment that are catching unattended dogs, removing their collars, shutting off tracking collars, or even destroying tracking collars and taking the dogs to either save them from their misconception that the dogs are abused or to flip the dogs, as Stacey mentioned, for profit. Aside from the dog's value, these tracking collars run anywhere from $100 to $600 each.
Wow.
This trend is a growing problem, often encouraged in social media, and my written testimony has several examples of that. I know of 8 dogs alone in New Hampshire that have had their collars removed or the dogs taken out of collar range to prevent their owners from finding them. Many states have tracking collar laws. In some states, they're felonies, and in some states, they're misdemeanors. And they publicize these laws to make people think twice before tampering with the collars to enable better punishment outcomes. The growing trend of pet flipping where the dog is stolen, and once the collar is removed or the microchip removed, there's no way to prove the dog is yours, and even some rescues and shelters are complicit across the country in this. Microchips are a form of positive identification, and tracking collars are a way for owners to track and recover their dogs and should be addressed instead of ignored by New Hampshire law. Some groups have mentioned to us that all veterinarians should be exempt from this bill's reach, but a veterinarian is authorized by the owner to treat an animal, and it's already deemed the owner's authorized agent and is covered by this bill. Another person mentioned that chips might need to be removed for medical emergency. I've personally microchipped over 100 dogs, and I know of literally thousands of microchipped dogs. There is no pressing medical emergency that would necessitate a microchip removal without the owner's permission. In the event of a traumatic accident with massive flesh and muscle damage in the region of a microchip, and they're implanted between the shoulder blades, I can assure you a veterinarian's not going to be fishing around to remove a glass chip the size of a grain of rice while putting that animal back together. So there's no conceivable reason a vet would be removing a chip from a dog without the owner's consent. In the event the animal is surrendered to shelters, once the shelter becomes the dog's legal owner, in New Hampshire it's 7 days, they can remove the chip or have the chip ownership transferred easily. And I urge you to please vote to support this bill. It's very important to the dog owners in New Hampshire, and it will protect both the dogs and the owners. And I can accept any questions if you have any.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much. Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony.
Next up, Senator, we have Angela Ferrari.
Welcome, Angela.
I'm back. Thank you for letting me speak on this bill. On behalf of dog owners of the Granite State, we provide our support for this bill. As Ms. Richardson outlined, there's a lot of reason to make sure that there are penalties for the removal or tampering with any sort of tracking device, collar, or identification, such as a microchip. As mentioned previously, dog owners of the Granite State membership includes hunters, mushers, livestock guardian dog owners, herding dog owners, and all of the general pet owners of dogs. And, you know, their best interest is to ensure that should they utilize any of these devices, that they would be remaining intact so that they could get their dog back. And based on that, we're very supportive of this bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Senator, we have Joseph Mullen.
Welcome, Joseph.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Am I coming through okay?
You are.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. My name is Joe Mullen. I'm from Grafton, Mass, and I'm the Northeastern States assistant manager for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, the 501c3 nonprofit I represent before you today. I would like to express my support for House Bill 338. I've also submitted written testimony to the committee as well, so I'd just like to touch upon some of the high-level points with my time. So across the nation, the crucial role that dogs have in the hunting community consists of tracking game, pointing and flushing upland birds, and retrieving downed waterfowl. Sportsmen and women have a strong attachment to and affinity for these hunting partners and often dedicate a significant amount of time and money into the training and upkeep of their dog's skills. Working with dogs is a cherished part of the hunting tradition for many. And in New Hampshire, dogs are a regular part of the hunting culture and play a vital role to volunteer leash dog trackers, as you've heard earlier, and to sportsmen, in the field and on the water. Hunting dogs serve as an extension of sportsmen and women working in tandem and as a team. The removal of a dog's collar, complete theft of a dog is a serious outward attack on a hunter's ability to enjoy our nation's time-honored traditions. Speaking from a personal sense, I utilize my retriever's electronic collar for both training purposes and for command recognition when we're in the field. I've spent more time and money than I'm willing to admit on his preparation going into each season, but more importantly, he's a valuable member of my family. I would just like to add to that. A close hunting friend of mine has a tracking collar for his dog, and I know that ran upwards of $700 plus. So they are very pricey pieces of equipment, just to be able to hunt with your hunting dog. So expanding the protections for dogs and setting a high threshold of liability may prove to further deter possible cases of hunter harassment, while also presenting a clear recognition of the contributions that dogs have in our sporting community. Once again, I'd like to reiterate my support for House Bill 338. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joseph. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Jen?
The last person, Senator, I have signed up to speak is Kurt Erenberg.
Welcome back, Kurt.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. I would just, again, I'm Kurt Erenberg. I'm the State Director with the Humane Society of the United States. We support this bill. Certainly want people to consider the tragedy of losing a pet, not only for the family, but for the pet itself by theft is just, I see some musical equipment behind you, Chairman and Mr. Chairman, and if that was stolen out of your car, I've had that happen to me in my life. It's, just compare it to a dog you love or something like that. So that's our message today. We support this bill. Thank you for your time.
I have both. Yeah, we have insurance and pets. Love you very much.
Appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
How much they mean to a family. Questions from the committee? And seeing none, thanks again. Jen?
Okay, we have Representative Bixby with his hand up.
Representative?
Hi, I just wanted to chime in for House Environment and Agriculture. Chairman Pearl had to leave, so I thought he might be doing this, but this is a bill that we heard last term and we were strongly in support of it. We were the first committee, and then Criminal Justice was the second committee on it. This year it just went to Criminal Justice, and they made sure that the penalty portions of it were in line. But this is something that we recognized as a significant problem that had to be dealt with. And just one aspect on the penalties, typically whether something is a misdemeanor or a felony, a Class B or Class A felony, is sometimes tied to the market value of the object stolen, the thing stolen. And one of the things we heard in testimony was that assessing the value of a dog is extremely difficult in terms of looking at the, what's the market value, because someone who invests, years of training in a dog may not have spent that much for the dog. Originally, it might be a dog that they bred, but the amount of the amount of value that went into that goes into the dog is not really reflected by its technical market value, and that so the I think the penalty portion that criminal justice worked out is highly appropriate.
Agreed.
And I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bixby, I don't know if this came to the House hearing on this, but we have an email from the co-chairs of the Governor's Commission on the Humane Treatment of Animals. And it's opposed because of the poisoning provision. It says, if you don't mind, I'll mention, it says there's currently a New Hampshire law, New Hampshire, and a criminal code that addresses poisoning of animals, and thus this legislation creates confusion. In addition, the commission had concern regarding the lack of any reference to a mens rea for the offense of poisoning, and only provides for dog's value and not any additional damages such as medical care or attorney's fees. So I didn't know if this came up in your committee's hearings and what you may have in response to that.
That didn't come since we heard this last term. That piece of information didn't come to us, so far as I recall, 3 years ago when we heard it. So that probably came to House Criminal Justice, and this term around, they were the ones that heard it this term. So I don't really have enough information to give a useful response on that.
Sorry, should have realized that.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask, do we have the sponsor still with us to answer that?
Jen?
I believe we do, yes.
If that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
In fact, I had raised my hand in order to do so. Could you repeat the question? I want to make sure I've got it straight.
We have a letter from the Governor's Commission on Humane Treatment of Animals from the two co-chairs stating their opposition because they said there's already poisoning language in statute, and then concerned about there not being a mens rea defense or a penalty for medical care or other costs that might be associated. And I just didn't know. I mean, it's basically the only opposition we have in everybody who's here, who's signed in.
Sure.
So I just wanted to see if that came up in the House.
It didn't come up to my knowledge. However, section 466:42-A, the bill, the RSA that this replaces is the RSA that addresses poisoning of dogs. So essentially, there will be no redundancy. The poisoning issue is replaced with this, and basically the current law does not provide for the medical bills and such. I mean, that might be a well thought out amendment, but nonetheless, this bill closely resembles what's in the law now for poisoning.
Thank you. May I follow up, Mr. Chairman? So not being an attorney, I mean, I think that clarifies everything really, and it's a repeal and replace. But in terms of the mens rea defense, you don't, as my understanding, you don't really need that in statute for an attorney to bring that as a possible defense on most any criminal charge, right?
I'm not an attorney either, but I believe you are correct on that.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony.
So Senator, we have Diane Richardson with her hand up to speak for a second time. If there's anybody else that would like to speak on House Bill 338, if you could please raise your hand now, and we'll go to Ms. Richardson.
Welcome back.
Hi there. Brian pretty much covered what I was going to say, but the bill is pretty much the exact statute that's existing. It only changes the penalty for stealing a dog and the penalty for poisoning a dog. The wording itself is the current law. So, I mean, as Brian said, an amendment to cover vet bills for poisoning would not be inappropriate. But we were creating this bill to add the collars and the microchips to the existing law that already covers stealing and poisoning, because it didn't cover microchips and tracking collars. So the top part of the bill is pretty much as current bill. So as Brian said, there's no conflict.
I see. Okay. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Diane. Chad?
So Senator, I don't see anybody else with their hand raised to speak on the bill.
All right, going once, going twice, and we will close the hearing on HB 338FN. All right, do I have a motion? Do we have time to go into exec? We've got a minute or two. Is there a motion to go into exec? And seeing none, we will wait. All right, so we close the hearing on that, and we're going to be waiting for a presentation for Matt Malux from the Governor's Office of Department of Energy. So you want to recess for a couple of minutes and wait for that? Let's do that. All right, so be it. All right, we'll be back at 2:30. All right. And we're back. Hey, Jim. Waters. Jen.
All right, there we go. We're all here.
Yeah. I like your beards. Is there a motion to move into exec real quick?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Cuoca.
Yes.
Senator Averard, yes. Is there a motion to,
I'll move ought to pass on 397, House Bill 397.
is there a second on that?
Which bill is that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
House Bill 397.
Ah, thank you.
Is there a second?
Did we already exec this? No.
So for the committee's clarification, House Bill 397 was exec last week, but after discussions with DES and a couple of other senators, there was an amendment that they sought to bring forward before the committee acted on House Bill 397. So after talking with Senator Avard, we're going to reconsider the vote on that and consider an amendment drafted by Senator Avard 1128S, which should be.
Rainey was supposed to.
And Rainey is here. I wanted to wait until there was a motion, I guess, before bringing him in.
Okay, it hasn't been seconded yet.
Yes.
Second.
All right, there we go.
Okay, so now that it's been seconded, Senator Gaida.
So what I'll do is I'll bring in Rainey. Oh, sorry.
Wait, Senator Gaida.
Yeah, I would ask Rainey to come in and discuss the merits of Amendment 1128S.
Okay, so we're kind of like in the voting mode though, right?
No, we're in the discussion mode.
Okay,
Right.
Discussion. Let's move it. Rainey?
Oh.
Rainey? Going once.
There we go. Rainey, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, well, for the record, good afternoon, Senator Avad, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Rainey Pelletier, the Assistant Director of the Water Division at DES, and help craft the amendment that you have before you. And what this does do is, if you look at the statutory reference that you see, currently the Port Authority has a cap on a dredging fee for $10,000. What this amendment does is it puts that same comparable cap on tidal docking structures and piers. The rationale behind that is that most, probably 95% of these, or maybe even 100% of these, there's federal money that comes in to perform the construction work. Historically, it's been very difficult to get enough money in that grant, if you will, to pay for a fee. In some of these structures, the wetlands fee could be somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. We at DES believe that it yields such public benefit, much like dredging the harbors on the seacoast, that we felt that we could review the applications with that $10,000 cap and felt it was justifiable just because of the need and because of the overall public benefit in the seacoast.
All right. Questions from the committee? Further discussion? None? Shall we move forward with the vote?
I'm still trying to look at all the documents, so.
Just for discussions, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Rennie reaching out on this. And I think that what's the main point here is it's just a question of fairness across the permitting process, that if we're doing it for the dredging, makes sense for the docks. And there's going to be a lot of activity at the port, and a lot of improvements and changes being made to the docks. And so it really just seems to make sense for consistency's sake to say that we're doing this across the kinds of activities that the port does at this amount. And it helps because it means there's some clarity and transparency as to what kind of money that they're looking at going ahead on this. So if that's killed a little bit of time, but that's the way I see it. And so.
Senator Gray?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with Amendment 1128. So I guess I'd move ought to pass on Amendment 1128.
Members of the committee, respectfully, because and that was an oversight on my part, because we are reconsidering the vote on this bill that we acted on last week, there should be a vote to reconsider the vote on this bill and then move forward with all the subsequent motions after that. I apologize for that. That's my fault.
Just one more question before we reconsider. Rennie, what conversations have you had specifically with members of the PDA? Should I try to touch base with them before?
Yeah, that's a good question, Senator. I think I talked with Gino Marconi, whom you probably know. I think he's probably listening in to this. I had told him that this was going to be heard. He and I have been working on this and talking about this for at least a year. And I think this year, because we had 397, which capped fees, as you know, for the municipalities at 3750, that it was appropriate to put this amendment on this bill, considering it was dealing with wetlands fees in general. And so to answer your question, yes, I've had direct correspondence with the Port Authority attorney and with Gino Marconi.
Thank you very much.
Move to reconsider.
Is there a second?
Second.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
Yes.
Senator Gaida?
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka?
Yes.
Senator Avard, yes. Is there a motion to move on to ought to pass?
Move ought to pass on the bill and ought to pass on Amendment 1128.
Second.
Can we do that at the same time?
Do it separately.
Yeah, you have to do it better.
So move ought to pass on the bill.
Move on to pass on the bill, and it's seconded by Senator Gaida. Senator Gaida?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we have to do the amendment. I think
You have to do the amendment first. Yeah.
we have to do the amendment first.
You want the motion of ought to pass made, but then you want a motion of ought to pass on the amendment.
So technically, sorry to jump in there. Technically, you made a motion to reconsider the vote that you guys took last week. So you need to reconsider that vote, which I'm assuming was an ought to pass motion, which means that you need to vote down the ought to pass motion. Then you can subsequently bring forward an ought to pass motion for discussion purposes, and then vote to take on the amendment, and then vote on ought to pass as amended.
Question, Jennifer.
Yes, sir.
If the ought to pass motion is there, okay, then is it not appropriate during that to have a motion for an amendment?
So you guys voted to reconsider what you passed last week. So I believe, and Griffin, I don't know, this is a little complicated. So I believe you have to vote on what you did last week, which I'm assuming was ought to pass, right? So I think you have to vote again on ought to pass, voting that down because you have a motion technically on the table for that. Then you vote to add on the amendment, and then you vote ought to pass as amended.
And Chairman, while we're doing all that, I mean, if Gino's here, I'd love to just hear from him somewhere during this process.
I know. I'm feeling a little stressed right now because we have we're supposed to be in a meeting right now with the governor's office, and I have a hard stop. So what is?
So
Sounds to me like we need to vote on ought to pass on the original bill. We need to vote that down. Then we need to move ought to pass. Then we need to move the amendment.
All right, let's get to it.
Okay.
So is there a motion to?
So you have the motion already. So you have the ought to pass motion already. So you just need to take the vote on that first to vote that down so that you can reopen the bill.
Senator Gray.
And I vote no, I guess.
Right.
Correct. Senator Gaida.
Senator Gaida, you're on mute.
Oh gosh.
Griffin, Griffin muted me. No.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
No.
Senator Everard, no. Is there a motion?
Move ought to pass.
Is
So
there a
we can
second?
discuss and then amend.
Second.
Senator Gray.
So no, so we're not taking a vote yet, Senator. We're gonna now bring forward the motion on the amendment. This was just to
Okay.
open the bill for discussion.
Is there a motion to on the amendment?
I move amendment 1128S.
Is there a second?
Second.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Everard, yes. Is there a motion on the
Move ought to pass as amended.
Senator, okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Waters. All right. Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Everard, yes. Is there a motion for it to go on consent?
Yes.
Move.
Senator Gray motions on consent. Senator Gaida seconds. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Everard, yes. Senator Perkins Quokka, you get the honors of taking it out on consent. How's that?
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right. Is there a motion to move out of exec?
Moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay. Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Everard, yes. And now we're going to move into a discussion with the Governor's Office or Commission of Energy.
I have to get back to finance.
Thank you, Senator Gaida.
Yeah.
All right, and welcome. And thank you for your patience, and we appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it is great to be here, and I promise that it will not, my presentation will not be as complex as what we all just witnessed. That was remarkable, and I couldn't keep track, but I appreciate the sheer number of votes you just took in about 2 minutes. Might be a new record. My name is Matthew Malo. I am the governor's budget director. Some of you might know me from my prior role at the Office of Strategic Initiatives, where I was the governor's energy advisor for 2 years, and very excited to be able to present the governor's plan to reorganize both the Office of Strategic Initiatives and the Public Utilities Commission into a new unified Department of Energy. Griffin, if you'd be able to bring up the slide presentation, I'm happy to walk through that. Most of all, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has today. And to the extent that it's possible, it would be great to have a conversational discussion. But I'll run through some of these slides, give you a brief overview of what we're hoping to achieve, and happy to take questions throughout. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I don't know if there's anything that you want to lead off with or anything as far as my presentation, but other than that, happy to get started.
You have the floor and go for it.
And just to allow me to be rude, just to confirm, everybody can see the slideshow on the screen. Is that correct? We're good.
Excellent. And we're off and running. Thank you, members of the committee, for the invitation to appear before you today. It's great to see you all once again. And as I mentioned, this is the governor's proposal, which exists within House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 of the state budget. State reorganizations of departments have traditionally been done through the budget, given that it is really the only vehicle that we have here in New Hampshire to make broad changes to how state government operates. So I know there might be some questions as why this isn't done as a standalone bill. The state budget really is that mechanism. It's the same process that was used to divide DRED into BEA and DNCR 4 years ago, and similarly to create the Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services during the last budget. And with that, Griffin, I think we're good to go on to the second slide. So at the 40,000-foot view of what we're hoping to accomplish here and what is in effect happens through House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 is the Office of the Strategic Initiatives, which is currently part of the governor's office, is dissolved. Now, OSI does everything from energy programs to the National Flood Insurance Program to the U.S. Census. At one point, OSI ran a scholarship program. It really has become this catch-all entity that does numerous different functions all within a single office. The intent here is really to elevate energy policy statewide and make sure that OSI's functions go to a more appropriate home. So with that, you'll see that the planning functions that currently exist at OSI, the State Data Center, National Flood Insurance Program, those all go to the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. The Conservation Land Stewardship Program is an easement monitoring program for properties both either held in a trust or held by different state agencies. That ongoing monitoring would go to become administratively attached to the Department of Administrative Services, or DAS. And lastly, those energy functions that currently exist at OSI, whether it be the State Energy Program or some of the federal weatherization or fuel assistance programs, those would go to this new Department of Energy. The PUC is the other side of this reorganization. The PUC is reorganized entirely within the Department of Energy. So everything that currently exists at the PUC would exist somewhere within this new department as well. And the last thing that we'll have on this slide is you might be familiar with the Office of the Consumer Advocate and the Site Evaluation Committee. These two entities are currently administratively attached to the PUC. They would continue to be administratively attached to this new Department of Energy. The intent here is not to make any policy changes to these two entities in any way, shape, or form. Any questions at the 40,000-foot view before we go further?
Yeah, thank you. Unless the committee has questions, I apologize. Nope, seeing none.
You know, if I may ask one question on this. And Matt, it's good to see you. Thank you. I know you're the busiest man in Concord right now, so much appreciated. I thought it would make a lot of sense for this committee to hear about this. I know you're going to be talking about it in finance. And I just want to say at the start, I'm really strongly supportive of this proposal moving forward. I did have a question about the PUC adjudicative functions, an administratively attached agency. I'm sure you're aware in the House there are some concerns about whether the bright enough line was drawn between the policy side, which would certainly be in the Energy Department's purview, and then the adjudicative functions here. So could you just respond to that?
Absolutely, and happy to talk about this on a later slide as well. But our major consideration for this reorganization really is to separate the adjudicative functions from those policy elements. Right now, all of that exists within the Public Utilities Commission. The proposal here is to draw a bright red line between those two functions. And this will be a recurring theme throughout my conversation today. If there are additional amendments, we're working with stakeholders, we're working with the utilities. We certainly welcome those during the Senate phase because we do want to make sure this final product is operable and puts New Hampshire on the best path forward when it comes to energy policy. So we're confident what we've put forward is that right mix, but certainly wouldn't foreclose additional amendments.
Thank you.
And with that, Griffin, we can go to slide 3. So here is a full list of what OSI currently does under current structure. Like I said, this entity does not have the ability to focus 100% of its time on energy policy. Right now, it's a mix of everything that you see here on this slide. And the rationale behind bringing OSI's functions into this new department is to make sure that the energy policymakers in state government can devote 100% of their time and not be pulled in a variety of different directions the way the current structure goes now. As I mentioned, OSI is within the executive department or the governor's office, which is a bit of a weird placement when you start to think about how important energy policy is. Why does this exist within the governor's office as opposed to a standalone agency, the way that other policy matters like DES or business and economic affairs exist under the control of a single agency head? So that's one of the things we're hoping to solve here as well. Griffin, go to slide 4. And here you can see some of those policy goals, some of which I've already articulated. But one of the most unique things that has arisen during these conversations, and these conversations really do go back to 2019, House Bill 156, which was a study commission to evaluate whether or not to establish a Department of Energy, something that was championed by former chairman Bob Backus of Science, Technology, and Energy in the House. He had pushed this forward, and I sat on that study committee. Study committee looked into some of these different issues, how energy policy is made in different states. And while that committee ultimately didn't come to a single unified recommendation to move forward, we were able to look at the work that committee did and ultimately put forward this proposal. It's a bit more narrow in focus, only looking at OSI and the PUC. Doesn't involve other parts of state government the way that that study committee was originally focused on. But one of those things is that this new proposal, because we're drawing a bright red line, helps to remove any perceived conflicts of interest. And one of the things that we've heard from stakeholders time and time again is that because PUC staff both participates in dockets as a party to those dockets, but then also has the ability to advise the commissioners as they come to their decision. So essentially, they're able to present their case, but then also, after both parties have had their say, go back and privately advise those commissioners on how to write their order. And not that we would ever prescribe any clear conflict of interest or any malicious purpose. There is the potential, or at least the perception, for that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
In this new proposed department, we separate the staff that represent the interests of the state and work to build the evidentiary record of those dockets entirely from those who might have an advisory role when the commissioners come to their decision making. So we see that first and foremost as one of the hallmark improvements from a governance structure through this proposal. The second bullet here you'll see is that we're adding more accountability through the governor and council process for all leadership roles. As you may know, right now, OSI, being part of the governor's office, does not have any governor and council confirmed positions. So whether it's the director of OSI or the deputy director or my old role as energy advisor, none of those require GNC confirmation. It's a bit of a similar story when you go to the Public Utilities Commission. Certainly the chairman and the two other commissioners that sit on the PUC go to GNC, they have 6-year terms. There's a public process built in there. But other leadership at the PUC, whether it be the executive director or the general counsel or the division directors, serve at a term that's set by the PUC commissioners, not governor and council. Through this proposal, every leadership position, whether it be the commissioners or the new commissioner of energy or the division directors, would require that governor and council approval, which we see as a great step forward for accountability for these policymakers in the state. And lastly, I think I've referred to this one a bit more already, but unifying all of the state's energy policy apparatus under a single department rather than scattering it between different sources across the state. Any questions on this slide before we go to the finances of this proposal in a bit more detail?
Unless the committee members want, just raise your hand if you have any questions. No? Okay.
Excellent. And as far, obviously doing this in the budget when we were before House Finance in Division 1, and we were thankful to earn a bipartisan vote of support out of Division 1, they were very interested to see what the financial picture looked like. And while certainly not the main thrust of this proposal does modestly save general funds by finding some of those efficiencies, essentially going from 2 state agencies into 1. So you see some back office savings, things of that nature. Nothing to write home about $250,000 or $300,000 each year, but was notable for the Finance Committee to look at. I will say the vast majority of these agency operations are not generally funded, either through utility assessment dollars or, in the case of OSI, largely federally funded through different grants that the state receives. On slide 6, you'll see an explanation of the total budget increase. So if you look at the compare report, you'll notice what appears to be, a growth in government, if you will. But when you look at where those increases actually come from, the vast majority are derived either from increases in federal funding grants for weatherization or the low-income heating assistance program, or the other major source of that increase comes from a PUC estimated increase in funds from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI auction. Those funds are a direct pass-through back to ratepayers. So you'll notice they appear in Class 73, which is a grants line. So most of the overall increase that you see, the state is merely a pass-through for those dollars going back to ratepayers. Any questions on some of the budgetary impacts?
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Matt, again, I haven't drilled down into all the details in this, obviously, but there had been discussion in the House about the attorneys. And I know they made some movement on, the original proposal to say DOJ attorneys would do it, but then the counter argument that, you need folks who specialize in this, and maybe the Energy Department PUC functions ought to have their attorneys. And so if you could discuss that, but also, the reason I'm asking now is that, is that issue reflected in these budget numbers?
Thank you, Senator. And yes, there was definitely some discussion in the House on the placement of the attorneys. What I would say is that they are certainly reflected in the budget numbers, both the total staff that the department would have, and I would say our intention is not to increase headcount, nor is it necessarily to decrease headcount. So all of the lawyers that currently exist at the PUC would continue to exist throughout this next biennium. And also, depending on how some of these new advisory roles are filled at the PUC, you may even see a net increase in the total number of lawyers at the PUC, depending on how those commissioners, advisors, positions are filled. I will have a slide a little bit later that we can go through that with an organizational chart, but I appreciate you raising it now.
Let me just ask one more on this part of it, but maybe a little bit more further on. So overall, I know there's also discussion in the House about the, how large a staff do the PUC functions really need, and comparison to some other states and so on. But I guess what you're saying is that there really won't be a staff reduction as far as this proposal goes to the number of people who are working with the PUC, or what is, am I understanding that incorrectly?
No, I think you're right on the money, Senator. And if we go to slide 7, Griffin, this shows a rough breakdown, or not a rough breakdown, but a breakdown is what we introduced to the House. So the PUC currently has 82 positions. the way the state's budgeting system works, it does not account for a non-classified position. Most positions in the state are either classified, permanent, or unclassified, meaning they have a term. OSI, because it's part of the governor's office, exists in this unaccounted for third category, if you will. So some of that net increase is directly explained from the OSI positions moving over. Additionally, you see that net new positions totaling 11 in each year. That's 11 total, not 22, so just 11. Those include the commissioner's advisors, which would be 6 of them, and also the division director positions, which would be 4, with that last additional position coming from the new offshore wind industry development office that was established through your work in Senate Bill 688 last session, and now funded for the first time through this proposal. So those are the quote unquote new positions, and you see existing positions abolished, meaning a 1. So it'll look as though there's an increase of 23 positions, but as I said, 12 of those come directly from OSI being dissolved and those positions being inserted into the one of the 2 buckets that the state uses for the vast majority of those positions. The other thing I would add is that 14 of these positions are currently vacant, due in part to the state hiring freeze and also just the fact that some of these are being newly created. So you would start to see those positions become filled over the course of the 2 years in this biennium. But ultimately, and I'll actually save my next point for when we get into the organizational charts. But when we create these new positions that will require governor and council confirmation, there is not a mechanism for us to force someone to take one of those jobs. So if they're in classified state service and they don't want to either go through the GNC process or they want to have the certainty of a position that's not termed, that's where some of that increase comes from as well. But that's something that we do expect the vast majority of those division director positions to be filled from within state government. But wasn't our place during a budget proposal to force someone to take a new position. But they certainly may have that opportunity if this were to become law. Any other questions on positions? And Griffin, if we can go to slide 8. And this is the last slide before the organizational charts, and I'm happy to walk through some of that structure. Just 2 quick notes here. The House Finance Committee did bring forward a series of technical amendments to fix some of those most obvious parts of the proposal, positions that weren't included in the correct accounting unit, some of the IT class lines that were misplaced. So there will likely be some additional amendments in the Senate phase. And as I mentioned earlier, we are working with stakeholders and the utilities and want to work both with the Senate and members of the House as well to make sure that whatever final product does get passed will be operable and deliver the best energy policy results on day one. But from there, I think we can go forward and work through some of the impacts of the different agencies. So Griffin, if you go to the next slide as well, looking at BEA on slide 11. So here you see the 6 planning positions at OSI that currently exist. These are being moved from OSI to a new division within the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Commissioner Taylor Caswell is very excited to bring this operation into his department. He really sees it as a natural fit with a lot of synergy, given the work that BEA already does. And will also help them work even closer with municipalities, which he sees as a great opportunity to boost the state's business development efforts. On slide 12, or if there's a question, happy to take it. If not, 12 and 13, this is the Conservation Land Stewardship Program, 2 positions that would just become administratively attached to the Department of Administrative Services. No changes from a policy perspective, just which agency would provide them those back office functions or any resources that they might need. So moving them to staff made the most sense given the size and scope of this mission. On slides 14 and 15, this is the Department of Energy. So this is that new department. Here is a high-level overview of the way this new department would be organized. And I'll start here at the top left. So you see the Office of the Consumer Advocate. There are no policy changes made to the OCA. They're currently administratively attached to the Public Utilities Commission. In this proposal, they are administratively attached to the Department of Energy. But again, no policy changes for them there. The second box over on that top row, you see the adjudicative commissioners. These would be the three commissioners that issue orders and decisions. We've, again, carved them out into their own separate entity to remove any perceived conflicts of interest, to draw that bright red line between who are the regulators and who are the policymakers. All the way on the right on that top row, you see the Site Evaluation Committee, again, administratively attached to this new department. We're not pursuing any policy changes through this reorganization. I know there's a lot of conversation both in the legislature and at Governor and Council as to what the future of the SEC should look like. But that's not something we're trying to bite off as part of this proposal. But we are aware of those conversations and certainly want to make sure the SEC stays or gets to a good place, depending on how you view the current setup for the SEC. From there, I'll go to the Office of the Commissioner. Much the same as any other department statewide, you'd have a single agency head with a deputy director that would oversee the 4 divisions below them. You see administrative support, which are the back office functions, accounting units, legal division, that are designed to support all of these entities together. So whether it be the adjudicative commissioners of the SEC or the department, the idea is to centralize those back office functions, which you see there. And then going down to the bottom row, you see 3 additional divisions: policy and programs, enforcement, and regulatory. And I'll go through those in more detail here on the coming slides. Griffin, if you want to jump forward here. So here you see the Commissioner's Office, just these 2 positions, again, overseeing the Department of Energy, specifically as that agency's leadership. Slide 17 brings us into the Division of Policy and Programs, and I apologize if this is a little small, but this really is probably the largest division at this new department. This is all of the federal programs that OSI currently oversees. So you see the weatherization program, you see the fuel assistance program, in addition to some of those more policy-oriented or programmatic-oriented roles at the existing Public Utilities Commission. So you would see the Sustainable Energy Division move into this Division of Policy and Programs. You would see the Offshore Wind Office be formed here as well. Any regional issues, either at ISO New England or NEPOOL or FERC, you'd see the NESCO manager here to oversee those efforts to represent the state's interests beyond our borders. The consumer division, again, this is something that currently exists at the PUC. Some of those external facing, client facing roles that are housed there, all under the single division of policy and programs. And again, the best way to think about this is anything that isn't regulatory in nature, that is programmatic, whether it be grants or rebates going back to ratepayers, or any of the state's pursuits either of offshore wind or issues in the regional energy market or at the federal level, that would all be housed here. Any questions on this particular division? I know I just threw a lot of information out on this slide.
Yeah, and just
Senator Waters.
Just, because a lot is falling by. So the vacancies here, the intent is that those will be filled.
That is correct. Yes.
It's
Absent,
budgeted, yeah.
Absent, the legislature unfunding those positions, the intent would be that they become filled.
Thank you.
I guess, thanks for the presentation so far. It's been very interesting. Would the division director or the commissioner be directly granted with authority to reorganize this after it had been set up if, it better accomplished policy goals, or has that thinking already sort of been done?
Yes, and that's a great question, Senator. And this is something that we'd see in HB 2 as passed by the House. There is express language that gives the commissioner, along with the Department of Administrative Services, authority to further reorganize with the consent of governor and council. So if there is an oversight, or if it becomes clear that these two positions really should be in a different place, the commissioner, so long as they obtain governor and council approval, would have that ability to make any additional changes throughout the biennium.
Yeah, thanks. I ask because, I think the overall goal of trying to separate policy and adjudicatory functions is an admirable one, but I don't know how much time has been able to go into whether, this is ultimately the best structure to produce long-term stability and energy policy, for our business community and for our consumers, in the long run. And I don't know if you're able to go into all that history today, so I just want to make sure there's room for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will say this was a lot of long conversations, again, building on what the study commission from 2019 had put together, which really was a comprehensive programmatic overview of state functions as they relate to energy. I certainly don't think we got everything 100% on the first crack. I think that's why we saw a slew of amendments on the House side, and we'll likely see at least one here on the Senate side as well. But I agree, right? We want to make sure this gets to the best place, and it does, I think, certainly give our office comfort, as well as hopefully the legislature comfort, that it wouldn't take further legislation to make some of those positional changes to the extent they need to happen.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, you mentioned offshore wind a few times. We are actually working on some legislation for that, thanks to Senator Waters. But it seems as though there's you emphasized that a few times. We're definitely looking at that in this restructure.
Yes, and that's an exciting opportunity to inject into this conversation. Senate Bill 668, which became part of House Bill 1245, I think, Senator, I lost track of the omnibuses last year, was signed into law. It created the office, but only had $1 worth of funding. So it's something that does technically exist, but is not currently filled. This proposal would be the first opportunity to put real money behind the offshore wind efforts of New Hampshire, working with our regional partners in Maine and Massachusetts and the federal government to go through that permitting process. And, we are probably, 5, 6, 10 years away from turbines actually in the water and operating. But it's important that the state put resources behind those efforts as soon as possible.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, just because you brought that up, Mr. Chairman, I just want to express again my gratitude to Commissioner Caswell for his commitment to this. The BFA has financed someone over the last few months, and having somebody even on a temporary basis in that office has meant huge progress for businesses around the state. So I really, I'm excited about this. Look forward to it. I will ask one question related to that, though, Matt. We had the procurement bill, and some part of the conversation around it was, well, a lot of the functions that are imagined in that bill might end up going into the Department of Energy, and fair enough. But that said, part of the conversation we had around that was, is it conceivable that this department be ramped up quickly enough so that next year we could do something if the legislature wanted to about procurement, so we don't get essentially snookered by our neighbors to the north and the south, who might in some ways try to take this industry away from us. So I guess it's a larger question, really. What do you sense your timeline is? I mean, I know the budget will pass at some point and we're off to the races, but is your sense that this department will be able to get going pretty quick?
Yes, that is certainly our intent. From a funding standpoint, this would take effect at the beginning of the next fiscal year, so July 1st of this year. That, of course, is assuming the budget passes at the end of June, and knock on wood, I think we're all hoping for that, but not worried. From there, because obviously governor and council, there is a lead time on any items that need to go before GNC. The governor would have the authority to designate an initial commissioner for those first 60 days to facilitate the transition and ultimately bring a permanent or a 4-year term for a new commissioner through governor and council. So we are pursuing this at an aggressive timeline to get everything up and running. But I do think it's easier to bring these two entities together because of the way that New Hampshire has been structured, right? A lot of the OSI functions, they might be moving offices, but those aren't new programs. Having the PUC commissioners be cordoned off to do what they do best and regulate, I think would, if anything, free up them to move some of their decisions on a quicker timeline and ultimately, put the new commissioner of energy in charge of this entity. There certainly will be a transitional period, but if we're talking about bills that would pass in 2022 and being implemented over the summer or fall of 2022, whatever they might be, I think we're well on our way by that point to having a fully functioning and ready to hit the ground running new agency.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, Griffin, if you want to go to slide 18, this here would be the Division of Enforcement. These are all existing operations at the PUC. So the Audit Division and the Safety Division would be reorganized under this division. So any of those investigatory or safety or audit functions is the general classification for what this division at the new department would be tasked with. The only other thing I would add is the safety director position is currently an unclassified termed position. This proposal would transition that to a classified role. And essentially, under this new structure, because you have a division director of enforcement, which would be that unclassified position, that was the rationale behind the change. Long term, there may be questions as to whether or not this current structure of management with an assistant director is the best structure, but given that that's a filled position, we didn't choose to make any decision on that point during this process. Moving to slide 19, this would be the regulatory division. And again, I apologize if some of this type is small. This would be the division that has the regulatory staff that appear before the commission to represent the interests of the state, help build the record for dockets for the commission to decide. And going back to that bright red line example, these would be the individuals that again represent the state's interests, but under no circumstances would they become advisors when the commission does its work to ultimately rule on those dockets. So here you see the existing positions for the electric division and the gas and water division organized under this new regulatory division. Keeping all that same staff, those same hierarchical relationships, we feel that by keeping people generally grouped in their current groups, that'll ultimately have this new department hit the ground running, given that you already have a lot of that existing structure baked in, but again, separating the state's position from any of those advisory roles before the commit or behind with the commission. Seeing no questions, slide 20, and we're almost here to the end. This here would be the support division. So again, this is the division that's the back office functions predominantly that would support both the PUC, the Department of Energy, and the Site Evaluation Committee Here you see the business office, some of those IT functions, the grants program administrator for any of those federal grants that'd be administered through the department. One thing that did certainly come up during the House phase was the legal positions here, whether or not those needed to be either divided between DOE and the PUC. We opted to centralize those, given that it's uncertain exactly where the workload would be heaviest. To the extent that any reorganization of legal positions does need to happen, again, the Commissioner of Energy, with the consent and approval of Governor and Council, would be able to move those positions if that need ultimately did arise. And also things like clerks would fall into a similar conversation, but again, centralized under the current proposal within the single support division. Any questions on this particular aspect? The only other thing that I'll point out on the very top is the executive director and the general counsel. Those are existing roles at the PUC. Those individuals serve on a set term. So to help facilitate the transition, they would continue to serve out the remainder of their unexpired term. And again, we see this as an asset to help this new department get up and running and make sure that is a smooth transition beginning on day one. Here you see the Office of the Consumer Advocate. This is its current structure. Again, we're not proposing to make any changes, including it just for your reference so you can kind of see the size and scope of the OCA's office. You see a similar slide on slide 22 with the SEC, which currently has a vacant administrator position. I don't believe the House included funding to fill that vacancy, but that might be something for the Senate Finance Committee to consider. Again, I know there's a lot of conversation about the SEC right now, but this proposal not seeking to make any changes to the either duties or the structure of the Site Evaluation Committee. And lastly, on slide 23, these would be the positions at that to support the adjudicative commissioners. You see the three commissioners at the top, some classified support staff for them, administrative assistants, legal research assistants, things of that nature. And then those 6 positions at the very bottom, those unclassified utility analyst 4s, would be their advisory staff to help them come to a decision on any dockets that come before them. That is the bulk of the new staff that this proposal would create. And again, the reason behind that being to separate that advisory capacity role that you see here to assist the commissioners from any regulatory staff that would, again, represent the interests of the state. So this is the other side of that equation, if you will. And that's everything I have as far as org charts and the presentation go, but more than happy to answer any other questions from the committee. And again, we're excited that this is a proposal that receives support in the House. And hopefully we'll see a similar level of support here in the Senate. We don't see this as a partisan proposal. I think Don Kreis, the consumer advocate, was recently quoted to say that this was a good idea when Chairman Bob Backus proposed it. It's similarly a good idea when Governor Sununu proposes it. And we've been excited to see the buy-in from stakeholders, whether it be from the clean energy sector or the utilities. I think there's recognition that the current structure hasn't been working as efficiently as it could. And we see this new structure of government as a big step forward and making sure that the energy policymakers here in New Hampshire have the resources and the tools to advance whatever policy the state might opt to pursue in the future.
Well done. Questions from the committee? Senator Gray? Usually nothing?
Not this time.
Yeah, letting it all sink in. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Matt, again, thanks so much. You know, as I said, I'm very strongly supportive of this. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of tinkering that might have to happen over the next few years, but that's what we do. And I just wanted to raise a kind of a concern and see if you had any kind of insight on this about the current operations of the PUC, that it does seem that there are another number of dockets that have really slowed down over the last few months for various reasons. And I guess that, I think there's some fear that, that now, nothing's going to happen there for months. And that, we've had some cases people have been talking about in the papers lately about how it's starting to hurt certain investments and so on. But I mean, given where you're perched in the governor's office, do you have any sense about what we can expect from the PUC over the next few months?
Sure, and I think there's some exciting developments that are on the horizon. I know the governor, I think at the last governor and council meeting, did nominate a third commissioner to fill out that full contingent. There was a vacancy for an unexpired 2-year remainder of a term. So the PUC has been short-staffed for some time. I think the hearing for that individual is on Wednesday and hopefully would be confirmed soon thereafter. I think that'll go a long way to get the PUC back on a good schedule, just again to have all 3 commissioner seats filled. As far as ongoing dockets, the language included in House Bill 2 does ensure that any open docket continues to exist, and whether it's assigned to the PUC, if it's an order, or to the department if it's rules-based or things of that nature, any of those investigations, things like that, not to have to start from scratch, right? We don't want to lose time or any of those invested hours compiling that good work. So I do think that, yes, there will be some bumps, but I think some of them will be resolved in very short order by getting that third commissioner seated, and then again, using a very aggressive transitory timeline for this new department to take shape.
Thank you.
But I share your concern. So
Yeah,
I certainly.
I mean, you hear about it, I'm sure. I just thought I'd bring it up for public record. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Further questions from the committee? Well done. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'm sure if any questions will arise, we'll make sure that you're aware of them for sure.
Absolutely. Happy to.
I hope you have some vacation plans for when the ink is dry.
Yeah.
On the budget.
We'll talk after June, Senator, but we're
all
happy
right.
happy to have some time.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And if we have any questions, we'll make sure that they come up, and letting it all sink in right now. But it sounds promising. So. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Senator. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. All righty. And with that, I guess unless there's any further business, I don't know of any that we have any at immediately pressing. We'll say goodbye for now.
And thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, for setting that up. That was really terrifically valuable.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, let's see how we move forward. And I did notice that he did talk about the wind a little bit, so I had to put that in there. I had to talk. Why not, right?
Well, I just say, that, he talks about policy functions in the energy department, and fine. I mean, they do propose policy, but I just think it shows the importance that the legislative branch, we're going to have to be sure that, that because that's been one of the problems of the PUC, they've been making policy that, the legislature sets policy. Right. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to kind of right that relationship, and to ensure that, the legislative will is getting, respected as it should be as things go forward. So I really hope we can all be on board on this in the Senate.
I agree. So, well, until we meet again, thank you, everybody.
Oh, we have to adjourn, don't we?
Yes. So is there a motion? To adjourn?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Abard. Yes. And